Hi everyone! During this video I'll be critiquing skills and capacities for different athletes in the squat and the clean. A skill is defined as the ability to perform a skill correctly in an efficient manner, whereas capacity is defined as the structural or functional limitations that reduce the efficiency of the skill. Gordon is a general population client. He has several mobility issues due to his sedentary job and previous injuries. He has skill issues in this exercise as he is a novice lifter and is not completely familiar with the skill yet. He is learning and therefore often demonstrates a lack of neuromuscular control. Until we make this control available to him, he will not be able to use his capacities to complete the exercise effectively. Due to a lack of ankle dorsiflexion, he has to flex more at the hips, causing a forward lean of the torso. I decided to place more weights underneath his heels in an attempt to increase ankle dorsiflexion, but ended up changing it to a large wooden wedge as he was struggling with his balance. He could benefit from using weightlifting shoes to combat the poor dorsiflexion in the ankles and increase depth in the squat. He is struggling to keep a centre of mass over his base of support, and this is causing the balance issue. There is some anterior translation of the knee relative to the ankles. I used unloaded box squats to enable him to gain more depth by sitting back into the movement and keeping the torso more upright. This forced him to sit back, but also to think about the muscles he needed to engage in order to perform the squat. I front-loaded the exercises with a dumbbell to allow him to maintain his balance. However, to make it more specific to the back squat exercise, I would then start to load from the back with a barbell. I also use a single leg approach, which will improve stability, coordination and strength imbalances between the left and right. Overall, strength in his posterior chain limits his skills, as well as not fully understanding the components of the squat. From an anterior view, I can see that he may benefit from achieving a slightly wider stance, so he can comfortably push the knees over his toes. I used a resistance band so that he could feel the tension around the knees and asked him to squeeze out against it, particularly his right knee, as it does not come across as far in the eccentric phase. This could also be due to a lack of control and recruitment in the posterior chain leading to the knee valgus. In future training, I'd like to encourage external rotation at the hips in order to increase squat depth. This external rotation should in turn result in greater stability due to the centre of mass being over the base of support as the pelvis descends between the legs. His gaze needs to be altered down, so he's looking directly ahead. This could be a lack of awareness, and I would cue him to look at a specific point. From a posterior view, we can see that there is again some forward lean and issues with thoracic position with rounded shoulders due to poor scapular traction and allowing the chest to fall forward. If we combine a greater external rotation at the hip and a more upright posture, we should be able to get this athlete to improve his movement strategy and maintain his stability throughout. It would be useful for him to foam roll his glutes, hamstrings and hip flexors, as well as increasing his mobility in both the hips and the ankle joint so that he is able to sit back into the squat. I introduced him to squatting whilst holding the rack, so the stability issue was removed, yet mobility can be increased slowly as he is able to hold himself up in the appropriate position, i.e. the same as he would be at the bottom of the squat. I have also introduced some resistance band work to strengthen his upper back to work against the kyphosis he has. We will work on his posterior strength and training using exercises such as deadlifts and variations, hyperextensions for the lower back, hamstring curls and glute bridges. James has been squatting for a number of years as part of his training program for rugby. It is clear that he understands the movement of the skill and shows good motor control compared to my other squat athlete. Anatomically, he has very long levers and he is tall. Due to physical dimensions, this is seen as a disadvantage because taller athletes have to deviate further away from their base of support in order to maintain a deep squat movement pattern. This often results in forward trunk lean, which we can see from the lateral view, as he will have to use this mechanism to counteract the backward shift of the hips away from the centre of mass. However, James is still able to squat comfortably below parallel. He has completed a lunge-bearing wall test to ensure that poor dorsiflexion was not causing this forward lean. The results from the test showed that he had a good range of motion at the ankle as he was 8.5 centimetres from the wall and able to get the foot forward of the toe. From the lateral view, we can see that there is a slight lumbar curve at the bottom of the squat, but this lordotic position is correct. What we do see in this video from the lateral angle shows that there is some degree of tucking, so we could either reduce the range of movement slightly in the squat, as he is already below parallel, or we could view that this is an acceptable level of tucking for this particular athlete. Either way, cues and training should be around his mobility and continuing to educate him about externally rotating the hips and sitting down into the deep squat with the pelvis between the legs. The anterior view, we can see a very slight movement in the right knee as it tends to move into the body. This is his previously injured leg, and so it is clear to me that there is a lack of strength here in the posterior chain. He also needs to shift his gaze upwards slightly, however this is not a capacity issue. From the posterior view, again, you can see that his right knee moves into the body very slightly due to a lack of strength in the posterior chain. James needs to increase his flexibility in his hips, hamstrings and adductors so that he can drop his pelvis straight between his legs as he externally rotates his hips, as well as thoracic mobility. Some of the stretches were illustrated in the images. It will be important for James to work on the strength in his posterior chain to allow him to get more depth in the isometric position at the bottom and to aid the ascent and descent phase. I would advise using both heavy controlled eccentric work with variations in deadlifts such as RDLs and hip thrusts, as well as lighter controlled single leg glute bridges to even out any strength imbalances. Exercises such as front squats, lunges and leg extensions also help to increase strength in the back squat. Although James is trained and familiar with a number of weightlifting exercises, he is a novice when it comes to the clean, which is an Olympic weightlifting exercise. He is keen to learn, but is still unfamiliar. This is definitely a skill issue that could be improved with practice. This would involve him understanding the movement of triple extension at the ankle, knee and hips, and to rearrange himself around the barbell to get himself in an efficient position. To begin with, he started with a power clean, as that is what he could originally achieve. He has some hip contact, but often ends up with a one-pull technique, and this could also be to do with his strength, as he would find it easy to just pull the bar up. Breaking down the movement into phases in this instance is extremely important. This often helps with coordination of Olympic lifting exercises as they have so many components. This view shows him when using the clean pull technique to break up the movement so that he could initiate the movement with a triple extension instead, rather than pulling the bar with his arms. I then added weight so that it was appropriate for his strength. Again, this was done to stop him pulling with the arms and to force him to use the shrug to finish the pull. He often struggles to keep the bar close to the body, so in order to improve the catch position, we use a hang clean against the wall, so that he didn't have room to manoeuvre and had to drop below the bar. We then used a hang clean so he could settle into the squat, although he started to wobble and the hips came far too far backwards, and he loses stability as his centre of mass moves away from his base of support. Continuing to practice and gaining confidence should improve this issue as it starts to improve over the video. We then progressed to a clean where he was still unstable, but progression continued. Practice and constant cues seem to be the key for now, with the squat and cue for external rotation at the hips will allow to drop down into an optimal squat position to set him up for the remainder of the lift. I would recommend him to practice frequently with an unloaded training bar or with a broomstick to drill in the different phases and continuously add them together. Although James is trained, he would benefit from utilising exercises that strengthen the muscles of the posterior chain, such as deadlift variations, weighted calf raises that drive triple extension. Front squats can be used to gain strength in the quads to ascend from the squat position, and trapezius muscles contribute to the shrug, so clean pulls can be used as they are more specific. He could also benefit from mobilising his shoulder joints to get into the rack position more easily, and hip mobility to catch the bar in squat position. This would help him to improve the skill. Izzy has done some Olympic weightlifting before. She comprehends the skill and has practiced for a much longer period of time than the previous athlete and understands how to move herself around the bar. It will still be important for Izzy to break up the movement and manipulate each phase individually. Off the ground, her shoulders need to be in front of the bar rather than directly over it. In order to achieve this, she needs to push off the floor with the quads so that she can make the big extension. It appears from my training with Izzy that she is dominant in her hamstrings and therefore her quad strength needs work. Another issue is that when she triple extends, her shoulders should be either in front of or over the bar at the beginning of the pull, and then they do not come back far or high enough at the end. This could be due to a lack of mobility in the upper back and shoulders or lack of strength in this area, affecting the shrug movement. However, it could also be due with a lack of strength in the triple extensions, leaving her at a disadvantage when she reaches the end of the second pull. Alternative exercises such as front squats would be helpful to increase strength in her quads when she's pushing off the floor. Leg extensions and exercises such as lunges, split squats can also contribute to increasing quad strength. It may be useful for her to carry out clean pulls as part of her training to increase the strength in the muscles such as the trapezius that help to perform the shrug. This will be more specific. Also, Izzy has thoracic mobility issues, so stretch out her thoracic spine using a roller. It will still be important for her to maintain her mobility in the hips and ankles for the triple extension. I would use similar exercises to the ones I used with James earlier in the squat.